Here's a stat that should stop you mid-scroll. In 1985, the average American home cost about 3.5 times the median income. Today, it's closer to 6 times, and in some cities, 7. That's not a small shift. That's the difference between save for a few years and buy a house, and spend your entire 20s and 30s just trying to catch up. So today we're answering the question everyone under 40 is quietly asking. Why did buying a house go from a normal life milestone to something that feels almost impossible? And once you understand the mechanics, you'll never look at a for sale sign the same way again. Let's start with the trap almost nobody talks about, and it's honestly the craziest part of this whole story. Right now, millions of homeowners are sitting on mortgages locked in at 3% interest from a few years ago. Sounds great for them, right? Here's the problem. Those same homeowners can't afford to move. If they sell their house and buy a new one today, they're not just paying a higher price, they're trading a 3% loan for one in the 6 to 7% range. On the same house, that can mean hundreds of extra dollars a month, just from the interest rate alone. So what do they do instead? They stay put. They don't sell. Some of them don't even move to a bigger house when they have a second kid. They just stay. Economists have a name for this: the lock-in effect. And it's created this bizarre chain reaction where sellers aren't gone. They've just frozen in place, refusing to give up their old rate. Less selling means less inventory. Less inventory means the few homes that do hit the market get bid up even higher. One frozen homeowner is a footnote. Millions of them, all frozen at the same time. That's a housing market grinding to a halt. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Some of those same homeowners aren't just sitting still. They're becoming landlords by accident. Picture this. A family needs to move for a job, but they can't stomach giving up that 3% rate and taking on a 7% one. So instead of selling, they rent out their old house and use the rental income to help cover the new mortgage. Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of families making the same calculation, and you get a flood of accidental rental supply hitting the market, which is actually part of why rents in some cities have started cooling off, even while home prices keep climbing. Renting is getting a little easier. Buying is getting harder. Same market, two completely different realities, depending on which side of the transaction you're on. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this is where the crisis becomes impossible to ignore. To afford the median-priced home in America today, at today's mortgage rates, the average family needs an income that's roughly $36,000 higher than what they're actually earning. Read that again. $36,000. That's not a gap you close by skipping avocado toast or canceling a streaming subscription. That's a structural gap between what a house costs and what a normal paycheck supports. And it's why the Housing Affordability Index, the actual metric economists use to track this, is sitting at levels not seen since the brutal affordability squeeze of the early 1980s. Except back then, the problem was sky-high interest rates alone. Today, it's a nastier combination. High prices and high rates, stacked on top of each other at the same time. So why haven't prices just come down to meet what people can actually afford? Simple answer: there aren't enough houses. The country has been underbuilding for over a decade. Zoning restrictions in a lot of cities make it slow and expensive to build new homes. Add to that a labor shortage in construction, skilled workers retiring faster than new ones are entering the trade, and you get a bottleneck where demand for homes keeps growing, but supply crawls along at a fraction of the pace. In fact, that construction labor shortage alone was estimated to have resulted in tens of thousands fewer homes built in a single recent year, and a multi-billion-dollar hit to the industry. Fewer homes built means the ones that already exist become more valuable, more competitive, and more expensive, especially in the cities where people actually want to live and work. Here's the part that stings the most, though. The part that turns this from an inconvenience into something that actually reshapes society. Housing isn't just where you sleep. For most American families, the home they own is the single biggest chunk of their net worth. It's the main way ordinary people build generational wealth. So when home prices skyrocketed during the pandemic years, anyone who already owned a home got a windfall. Their equity ballooned almost overnight. But anyone who was renting at that exact moment, anyone who was a few years away from saving a down payment, watched the target sprint away from them in real time. The gap between people who got in before the surge and people trying to get in after it isn't just a pricing difference anymore. It's turning into a wealth gap between generations. And every year, this affordability crisis drags on. That gap gets a little wider and a little harder to close. And here's a twist that catches a lot of people off guard. In today's market, in a lot of areas, renting is actually significantly cheaper than buying the exact same home month to month. We're talking scenarios where renting a house runs somewhere around $1,500 to $2,000 less per month than what it would cost to own that same property, once you factor in the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Which means the math that used to be obvious. Renting is throwing money away, buying builds equity, isn't nearly as simple as it used to be. For a lot of people right now, buying only makes financial sense if you're confident you'll stay in that home for many, many years, long enough for the math to eventually flip in your favor. So let's zoom out and connect all of this together, because none of these pieces exist in isolation. They're feeding each other. Mortgage rates jumped, which triggered the lock-in effect, which froze inventory. Frozen inventory collided with a decade of underbuilding, which was worsened by a construction labor shortage. Limited supply meeting still strong demand kept prices propped up, even as rates stayed high, something that historically almost never happens at the same time. And underneath all of it, home equity kept compounding for existing owners, while first-time buyers got pushed further and further to the back of the line. This isn't one bad decision by one group of people. It's a chain reaction, years in the making, where every link in the chain made the next one worse. So if you're in your 20s or 30s right now, feeling like homeownership is some milestone that's always 10 years away, no matter how much you save, I want to be clear about something. That feeling isn't in your head, and it isn't a personal failure. The math genuinely changed. The house that took your parents 3.5 years of income now takes almost double that, at interest rates nearly twice as high as what they may have gotten. You're not bad with money. You're playing a completely different game than the one they played, on a board that's actively tilted against new players. That doesn't mean homeownership is dead, or that renting forever is your only option. It means the old playbook, just save up and buy whenever you're ready, needs an update. It might mean looking at markets outside the ones everyone's competing over. It might mean running the real rent versus buy math for your specific situation, instead of assuming buying is automatically the smarter move. It might mean being patient and waiting for supply to catch up, because eventually, it has to. But the first step is exactly what we just did. Understanding why this is happening, instead of just feeling the pressure of it, without knowing where it's coming from. Because once you see the actual mechanics behind the crisis, you stop blaming yourself for a math problem that was never really about you in the first place.